Okay, hi guys. I'm just going to do a short video about the position attribute in CSS for those of you who are learning CSS for the first time and how it can affect the way that elements are shown on the screen. Basically, the tricky thing to understand with the position attribute is that the way that you set this attribute will also have an effect on how the top, left, bottom, and right attributes are interpreted for any given object. So the first thing we're going to look at is basically just a page I mocked up with some paragraphs with some content, a background, a wrapper, which is like a div that wraps around the content on the page, and then this block, which is just a div with some CSS width, height, and background color. And I can show you the code for that right here. We've got the wrapper, which is set up here. And then we have the block, which is set here. And what I want to these are just some padding, color, and so on. Doesn't make any difference what we're going to show you today. What I want you to pay attention to here is these two properties. So as you can see on the block, we have a top set at 10 pixels and left set at 10 pixels. And currently, if I remove those, you'll see that having them set or not set has no effect on the page. This is because any element which has the default position value, which is position static, and that's the default setting for all elements in HTML, will ignore the top and left properties that are set because the position is static in the sense it won't move on the page. There are three other values we're going to look at for position. We have absolute, relative, and fixed. The first one we're going to look at is relative, and as I said in the class, when the position is relative, the object will move relative to where it would normally have been in the page. So if we set this to position relative without changing those top things, and I refresh the page, you'll see the block is going to move down by 10 pixels and left by 10 pixels. That is to say, it's added kind of like a margin between itself and top, and itself and the left of 10 pixels. And that positioning is relative to where it would have been in the page. The interesting thing to note about this is that the page is still behaving as though the block were in its original position. It's not taking into account the fact that we've moved the block down, i.e. the text below didn't move down when we moved the block. We can see this if we use a nice big number for top, put it to 100 pixels, you'll see the block moves down over the text, but the gap in the text of where the block used to be is still held. The text is still like behaving as though the block was originally there. The next value we're going to look at, so that's basically relative. The next value we're going to look at is absolute. And if I switch the position to position absolute, leaving the values of top and left the same, so top 100 pixels, 10 pixels for left, and I could have used bottom and right as well, or instead of, or whatever. I just chose top and left because it's kind of easy because the top, this is like the beginning of the screen. If I refresh the page, you'll see two things have happened. One thing that's happened is the block is now 10 pixels from the top of the page, and 100 pixels from the top of the page and 10 pixels from the left of the page. It's no longer relative to its original position, and the text is now behaving as though the block doesn't exist. So it's kind of like when you switch something to position absolute, it is what we say, it's removed from the flow of the page. So the text suddenly starts behaving as though the block doesn't exist. The other thing that happens is the block, and I wrote this in my CSS, the block now moves based upon its nearest parent, so relative to its nearest parent, with position not set to static. So basically the default position for every element is static, and if you don't change anything, the block is now set to absolute, but everything else in the page is set to static. And so the block is positioning itself by default. It's looking all the way up the tree, from block up to wrapper, up to body, and now up to HTML, and it's actually positioning itself 10 pixels from the left of the HTML element and 100 pixels from the top. If you scroll, you'll see that it sticks in that position on the page, so it's really relative to the HTML. It's not relative to the window, it's relative to the HTML document. However, imagine we wanted to position this block 100 pixels to the left and 100 pixels from the top and 10 pixels to the left of the wrapper element, i.e. this element that goes around our text. To do that, we have a little trick. With the wrapper element, with any element, we can set its position to relative. But we won't give it a top or a left value or any other position value. That means that the position of the element will be relative to its the position of the element will be relative to itself, 0 top, 0 left, 0 bottom, 0 right. So that means it will be displayed exactly where it used to be. So it doesn't actually visually move the element at all. What it does do is allows an element to be positioned now that's within it, that's set to absolute. It's now positioning itself based upon that parent, because it's always positioning itself. The absolute element is always positioning itself based upon its nearest parent with a position not set to static. So we now change the position of wrapper to relative, so now it's not set to static. So now this block is positioning itself based upon its position within the wrapper and not based upon the whole page. The final one we're going to look at is fixed. And position fixed, which we're going to play to the block, is pretty much the same as absolute with two crucial differences. The first one is that it will ignore any position relative that you put on any parent element. It totally ignores that rule, so it's not the same as absolute in that sense. And the second thing, obviously, you probably noticed, is that as we scroll, an element which is position fixed stays to exactly the position you gave it, with respect not to the HTML document this time, but to the window. So this one is going to be 100 pixels from the top of the window and 10 pixels from the left of the window. And if I bring the window in, you'll see that my text moves around and everything, and all my paragraphs like shrink and stuff, and my block stays in exactly the same position, i.e. 10 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the top and 10 pixels from the left of the window. And so that is the key with fixed elements, and that's useful often for making menu bars on websites or navigation which floats down. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If you do have any other questions about that part, give me a shout. Otherwise, I hope that the rest of the class makes sense, and I might do another one of these videos if you appreciated it, to explain some of the other more complicated things we'll do in JavaScript or in the CSS. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you next time we talk. Bye.